Hello, everyone. This is Stephen from Âtrium Lab. Welcome to this week's Âtrium X Space. So today we have on Sebastian from dcSpark. For those that don't know Sebastian, he's one of the OGs, OG Cardano builders, and he founded dcSpark, one of the very first large development companies on Cardano, together with the founding entities. So I'm curious to hear what he has for us today. And of course, we also have Peyton here. Let's see. Good morning for you, Peyton.
Afternoon now. It's 12:01, but good to see you, Stephen. How you doing today?
Afternoon. Hey, doing well, doing well. Excited for this one.
Me as well. As you mentioned, we're having Sebastian on, and I've done podcasts and spaces with that guy for probably 5 years now, which is crazy to say. So I'm excited for this one. I see him joining in down there.
Yeah. Welcome, Sebastian. Let me get you up here. All right. Let's see. There we go. So, anything new with you, Peyton? How's the non-smoking going?
It's going pretty well. I mean, it was actually a bit easier than I thought. Everybody acted like quitting nicotine was like the end of the entire world, and I definitely got cranky for a little bit. But a lot of people made me lose hope in a way. They're like, "Oh man, you quit this time? Don't wait, or you'll be back on it in no time." So still going strong. I guess I should be a little humble and say it could still happen in the future. But happy to be here and off the thing that was killing my lungs. Sebastian, it's good to see you.
Hey, likewise.
How have you been doing? I was saying before you came up here that I think we've been at this. We've done spaces or podcasts with each other for almost 5 years now, and here we are, 2025, still at it.
Yep, there's always new things being built, new exciting things going on. So it's never a dull moment.
Yeah, definitely. So the way that we structure these spaces, we usually do the first 10 and 15 minutes, with some news. And then we get into, what you've been working on lately, with Starstream and dcSpark and Pima. I'm excited to definitely hear some updates. So let's get into the news. First off, I see that we had Midgard initial open source release. Is that available now, Stephen, or is that coming later this week or next week?
As far as I read, they open sourced the code, or at least the first version of it. So always curious to see what the guys at Anastasia Labs are building, and it will be used for it will be a layer 2 on Cardano. So curious to see what they're building and what the reaction will be from the community.
Yeah, and me as well. I mean, just open sourcing the initial release, I think, is a really good sign of progress. There's a lot of things happening in the background to see that release there. The other piece of news that we have is the Emergo Academy. It closes after 6 years. I personally, I never used the Academy or took it, but I am a strong believer in the importance of education. Right. I mean, a lot of people in this space, if they don't have the proper education coming in, they can, lose access to their funds. They could get hacked, or maybe they receive a DM from somebody that's claiming to be me, and they take their money. So, education is really important. So I am a bit sad to see, any education close on Cardano. But when there's, some chapters closes, there's new beginnings. We're getting close to launching Atrium's mainnet. We'll get into that a little bit. Just give you guys some updates about Atrium here soon. But we have an education portal for with 26 videos, motion graphic videos that teach you, what is Cardano, what is Cardano governance, how do I stake, all these different things. We have this already live on testnet. If you go to alpha.atrium.io, you can see the videos and the education that we have in there. And I think Emergo's Academy was a bit more, kind of person to person in a way, whereas what we're building is more self-guided, right? So I would like to see that, more kind of person to person, people helping others, educate and onboard onto Cardano. And I think Atrium really is a good tool to work with when you're bringing someone into the ecosystem. I used to help people, onboard to Cardano all the time in 2020 and 2021. And, what I was showing them was my videos and then like a blog post from, the Cardano Foundation or something. Whereas I think as we head into the, the next, period of all these new users coming in, I think what you do is you use Atrium, in collaboration with you being there and kind of helping them, because people like their hand being held, if you have the time for it. Anyways, Sebastian, I know you're not, with Emergo anymore, and I'm just curious, do you kind of have any history of the Emergo Academy? Have you worked with that at all?
Yeah, actually, I went to India quite a few years ago to help start it up, and we went touring to different universities across India, talking to different universities about blockchain and Cardano. So I met a lot of the initial people helping to start the project. I've heard good things about it, but I was not super involved beyond the initial startup. But they're always very job focused. The main thing they want to help people with is go from learning about blockchain to getting a job in blockchain. And I've heard a few people have success with that. So obviously, I can't speak to the uh, program in detail. But at least I know a few people who got value out of it.
Yeah, I mean, if you have heard good things from it, I'm definitely sad to see it go. I think education is really important, and that kind of brings me to our next topic. There's a new governance website that launched. You guys can check it out by going to governancespace.com. And I was pretty excited to see this one. Right now we have, gov.tools, we have 1694.io, and now we have governancespace.com. And it's a different take. It has some of the same functionality as some of the other websites, but it also has some new functionality. And I'm excited to see more tooling release around governance. I mean, if you guys remember when the hard fork came, gov.tools was still on SanchoNet there for a little while. So just having more people building tools for people that are participating in governance is a good thing, because I think we need more governance, participation. If you haven't already, become a D rep, delegate to a D rep. It's really easy, but I imagine a lot of you have, just because you heard you can't withdraw your staking rewards there. So the next, have you checked out Governance Space at all, Stephen, Sebastian? First thoughts, first impressions.
It looks interesting. Like you say, there are a few things that I haven't seen yet on other sites, like the composition of the committee members of the constitutional committee. If they are SPOs or not, or any social media links that they have. So it's good to know who is representing us, and yeah, it's also interesting to see where all the people are from, so it's always nice, and to also have their contact information. If you want to contact them, it's nice. And analytics, things like that, are always good to keep up to date with all the proposals that are currently live. So yeah, I like it actually. I think I'll start using it actually. So yeah, don't forget to leave a comment, everyone, so everyone gets informed about our space. So leave a comment with the comment button over there. And yeah, maybe we should move on to Sebastian. And yeah, what if for the people that might not know you that well as we do, can you give us yeah, a short intro on you, Sebastian, and yeah, dcSpark?
Yeah, so I've been involved. So, a brief intro. I've been involved in the blockchain space professionally since 2018. My first professional job in the blockchain space was with Emergo, which is one of the companies that started Cardano, where I was leading the Cardano side of the R&D team there for a few years, working on a variety of projects, including Yoroi Wallet, which was the first light wallet for Cardano. But also, I helped write a lot of the initial CIPs, the Cardano improvement proposals for the blockchain, and I wrote a lot of different open source libraries for tooling infrastructure for building with Cardano. Afterwards, I left that company to start my own company, dcSpark. We did quite a lot. We built the first sidechain for Cardano called Milkamita, which at the time was an EVM sidechain for Cardano that allowed you to use EVM smart contracts without having to download MetaMask and without having to swap funds. You didn't have to buy ETH, you didn't have to download MetaMask. Just from a Cardano wallet as is, you could start using EVM smart contracts. And that did really well. We had over 100 million TVL at the peak, up until some third party that we were not involved with got hacked, and that kind of destroyed that project. Unfortunately, it's always sad when a company started gets destroyed by something you were not involved with at all. But such as crypto. Um, and then we then went on to create Paima Studios, which is a company focusing on building applications that don't require bridges, specifically to avoid the bridge hacks that were common at the time. With Paima, we worked a lot on trying to enable hybrid dApps, which is dApp that's in multiple different stacks. For example, you could build an app that uses EVM and Cardano at the same time. Or recently, what we're working on a lot is ZK and Cardano at the same time. And we've built quite a few dApps with Paima. Our most popular one is called Tarochi, which was an RPG game that is fully on chain. So there's no centralized server at all. That game had a few thousand daily active players for quite a few months, and we peaked at over 10K DAU. So it's a very successful game. And nowadays, we spend a lot of time trying to help build the next generation of dApps. So as we were building these kinds of experiences, we noticed that there are a lot of problems we ran into multiple times around scalability. For example, especially in the gaming side, you have a massive amount of transactions coming through, and how do you do this in a way that actually scales? And also, we were trying to tackle privacy. So, for example, how do you build an app where you can do actions that don't reveal information that is like private? This is really common, not just in games where you often have fog of war. It's really common in things like real world assets, right? For example, you want to be able to prove your identity, prove that you live in a certain country without revealing um, information about your passport, information about yourself. You just want to reveal that you live in a certain country for KYC purposes. Or another example is you don't live in a specific country like the US. So it's like an example of private states. This kind of scalability requirements are also really common for real world assets as well. So, for example, you might hear a lot of people talking about use cases like traceability using real world assets, where there's a massive amount of transactions required to track all the different, wine bottles, all the different books, all the different whatever they're trying to track. Maybe another good example of privacy is stablecoins. So one of the problems with stablecoin adoption is that oftentimes people don't want to send or receive, like $10 worth of a stablecoin because they've revealed their address, right? And so you get rid of privacy. Like, do you really want to reveal your entire financial history to your friend just to pay, $10 for a beer?
You still there, Sebastian?
I think we lost him because I can hear you, Stephen. For anybody just tuning in, if you're enjoying the space so far, make sure you leave a comment. Click that bottom right-hand button, leave a comment on there to bring some more people in. We do these spaces every week, normally at 11 a.m. EST, 16 UTC. but we haven't had our time change yet. So 16 UTC, that's what we're going to say from now on. That's when we do the spaces. So Sebastian, are you back with us? So normally every week, oh, I saw a mic mute. Can you hear us, Sebastian? I think he's doing a little lap down and around. So I think where he left off was around, people don't want to give out all of their wallet information when they do a transaction. You're back.
Testing. Yeah, I got rugged. Unfortunately, Twitter Spaces.
No
many
worries.
years later, still full of bugs.
Yeah. So where you left off at was, people don't want to reveal their entire wallet when they're sending a transaction, and then you're rugged.
Yeah, exactly. So there's a lot of cases where you need this privacy, you need the scalability for a lot of different use cases that we would like to have, on Cardano, for example. And there's a technology that solves this called ZK cryptography. You might have heard of it because it solves so many issues that a lot of companies are super interested. And so we were really interested in this topic. So we did a lot of R&D on this field of research. We worked with a lot of different ZK blockchains, some of which you might know, like Midnight and Mina. And we also co-founded some companies in this project. For example, we helped a project called Zeko Labs, which is like a ZK rollup project. We helped Lumina, which is a private DEX. So we did a lot of different experimentation in the ZK space, trying different things, seeing what works. And as we were doing this, we built kind of an expertise in this domain over the past 2 and some years. And as we were building this, because we have so much experience, building different apps, we're trying to think about what would the ideal setup be for creating applications that leverages the power of ZK? How can we make writing apps that unlock these functionalities super easy to write? Notably, let me kind of give you an intuition for a lot of people are trying to do and what we're doing a bit different. And that'll kind of give you an intuition for how we came about Starstream, which is the ZK VM we're building. Okay, so ZK is this technology that I mentioned that gives you all these benefits. It has privacy, it has scalability, it has all these different things. Do we need a new system to do it? And the answer is no. Like, you could take Plutus and combine it with this technology, and it gives you a version of Plutus that can have private computation. It can have the ability to do multiple large computations and have a proof at the end that the computation was done correctly to give you the scalability. The ZK can be combined with the existing architecture. The problem is that it doesn't give you a holistic approach, right? It gives you a way to kind of piecemeal, step by step, like a ZKify your architecture. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. In fact, you hear about this often in the Ethereum space. People talk about like a ZK version of EVM, so you can write smart contracts that give you kind of more scalability. But there's limits to how much benefit you can get if you are optimizing stuff on a piece by piece basis. And so we were thinking, what if we think a bit more holistically? Instead of trying to ZKify individual Plutus smart contracts, what if you were to write a whole new UTXO based virtual machine based on these concepts of ZK? And we figured out a way to do it, leveraging this technique called coroutines, which is a relatively newer technique in computer science. It's not new per se, but the usage of it in languages has increased over the years. So a lot of languages like Rust had it for a few years. Some languages like WASM don't even have it yet, and it's still like an experimental mode. So it's a fairly new technique, and we noticed this technique actually gives us a really intuitive way to build UTXO-based smart contracts that are easily ZK provable, which is one of the key things that a lot of people have been missing in this space. They've been trying to figure out how to make ZK work with UTXO, and I feel like nobody's quite solved it so far. But I think we came in with a new level of abstraction that really hits all the points you want to get and gives us this really nice ZK VM. So great, we have this new VM called Starstream that gives us the ability to do private computations. Now we can do like real world assets, like proving your identity. It means we can massively scale blockchain like Cardano, because we can basically enable any amount of transactions to be backed together into single transactions. So instead of having to submit like 100 transactions on chain, you can batch them all together into a single transaction with no extra cost. So it gives you massive scalability. And so the question is, well, how do we get this integrated into Cardano? And we created a working group for this called the Starstream Working Group that's working on the core VM, as well as working on trying to get this integrated into Cardano and potentially other cryptocurrencies, like different blockchains as well. They're interested. So actually, in the Starstream Working Group, there's quite a few other chains present as well that are also interested in Starstream and getting Starstream integrated into their stack.
Awesome. So, this kind of lives by itself right now. You already have this working group created. How do you imagine a Cardano integration into Starstream?
Yeah, so one of the reasons I think Cardano is kind of a natural first fit is because, as I mentioned, Starstream is UTXO based and Cardano is UTXO based. So it gives us a fairly intuitive way to combine the two together. Notably, Cardano supports multiple different virtual machines at the layer 1, right? So if you don't know, Cardano has this virtual machine called Plutus, and the Plutus VM actually has multiple versions. There's version 1, version 2, version 3. And at the Cardano level, at the blockchain level, these are all implemented as separate virtual machines. So Cardano already supports having different virtual machines at layer 1. And so it gives us a pretty intuitive path for integrating Starstream there as well. This is say when you're using a Cardano smart contract, you'd have the choice between, do you want to use Plus V1, Plus V2, Plus V3, or do you want to have Starstream be the VM that operates this transaction. So I think we have a pretty clear path from both the implementation and the design perspective for the integration. Of course, there's other ways you could deploy Starstream, but given the size of the Cardano community, the fact people know us, and the kind of relative ease of the integration, this is one that we're super interested in and putting a lot of focus on too.
Okay. Yeah, that's really interesting. So I kind of want to compare this to Icon, for example. So is Icon it's still using the Plutus VM, whereas this would be an entirely separate VM, or
Yes,
is
correct.
Icon its own?
Yes. So the goal of Icon is to make writing Plutus applications much easier. The goal of Starstream is, what if we try to reimagine what a virtual machine in UTXO would look like? Keep in mind, Plutus was one of the first attempts at writing UTXO smart contracts in all of blockchain, right? So there's a lot of lessons learned from writing Plutus and creating that system that we have kind of taken with us into Starstream as we design this new VM to make sure that we kind of hit the ground running and don't run into the same early issues of early versions of Plutus that Icon were meant to solve. So um, Starstream is, I would say, kind of a spiritual successor to these kinds of efforts, which is that it doesn't use Plutus. Rather, it uses the kind of lessons learned over the years to try and think about how do we build a new VM that is hopefully not only easier to develop with, but also introduces these new kinds of applications that you can write that you wouldn't be able to do before.
Okay. So if I understand correctly, and Starstream doesn't use any of the Plutus virtual machines, so that means then that we would need to integrate Starstream into the Cardano node software to be able to allow it to understand Starstream transactions and smart contracts. Is that correct? Or
Yep. Correct. So basically, the timeline for Starstream and the Cardano would look like basically we're building the initial Starstream implementation on our side. And then we would do a proposal to the DREPs saying like, hey, we've built Starstream. Here's a website where you can test the integration, see what it looks like, see if you like it, try and build something with it. And if people like the direction, like where this is going, you would vote on this as a DREP. Do you want to integrate this into Cardano itself? And so our goal is to try and build something that's really, really great that the community sees and they instantly fall in love with and go like, oh man, this would be so powerful if we had this on the blockchain, and then vote to proceed with the integration.
Okay. Yeah, I think that that's really interesting. I mean, what trade-offs have you seen so far with this? For node operators, for example, one thing that people mention about Solana is that running a Solana validator node is, it's really expensive. It takes up a lot of storage. With Cardano integrating Starstream, what sort of trade-offs can the Cardano community expect? Because normally, integration, not everything is all positive.
Yeah, I would expect that the memory requirements and the CPU requirements would probably go down drastically. So it would probably make a lot of these smart contracts significantly more efficient from an on-chain verification perspective. Notably, the reason this happens is because the CK technology I mentioned earlier has this really interesting property where generating transactions is more expensive, but verifying transactions is cheaper. So it means that the trade-off you get is that users who are creating transactions in the browser, interacting with the apps, will have a slightly slower experience, where it'll take a bit longer for their DeFi transaction to be generated. So usually it'll take a few seconds. But the trade-off is that they get these new features like the privacy. They get, the ability to do like transaction chaining for free. So although the time to create an individual transaction is slower, the time to batch multiple transactions together will end up being faster for the user anyway. And for this extra performance hits, the verifiers, the stake pools, will be able to verify these transactions faster.
Okay, so would that also imply? I'm just trying to figure it out how it would work. Sorry, I'm thinking and speaking at the same time. But would that mean that dApps would also need to adjust slightly, and wallets would also need to adjust how they build their transactions, how they are composed, or would it be similar to how they're doing it now?
Yeah, so by being a new virtual machine, we do not require people to use it in the same way that when a new version of Plutus comes out, dApps are not required to upgrade. So the existing application that exists with Cardano wouldn't have to change anything for this to go through. This would be an opt-in. So basically, any dApp that wants to build something like real-world assets, that wants to build something like gaming, that wants to build something like DeFi, regular DeFi, or private DeFi, or all these kinds of things, would have an option to do so. So if they want to leverage Starstream, they now have this option that unlocks this new set of functionality for them.
I mean, the thing that really sticks out to me is that it brings, ZK to Cardano at the layer one without forcing Cardano to rely on this, partner chain framework. Is that assumption that I'm making correct?
Yep, that's correct.
Okay. I mean, that's really interesting and unique and a crazy feature that I haven't heard anybody kind of, bring out there to the wild. So that's really exciting, at least to me.
Yeah, and
How.
the reason for
Oh, go
that,
ahead.
I kind of hinted at earlier, it's because historically, these different ZK systems that have been built have all relied on a way of programming that is very different from how Cardano is built. It's called the account model, which is more closer to Ethereum. And the fact that the way to write these zk smart contracts has historically been different has meant that zk has historically always been deployed at these kind of like layer 2s or partner chains where they have a totally different environment. And it's like, oh, this environment is optimized for zk. It has to use a different computation model. The beauty of Starstream is that we figured out how to unlock this technology in a way that still just uses the UTXO model that everybody's familiar with, which is something that nobody else has really managed to figure out. And so that's why, unlike some of these other systems, we have a much clearer path for integration directly into Cardano. Now, I'll say that there is some other implications for the integration. One of which is, this is relatively newer technology. So Plutus was new technology when it was developed, right? And when it got added to Cardano, it took a few years for it to kind of settle and people to come up with best practices and all these kinds of things. And so because Starstream and ZK in general is kind of a new technology, it will probably take some time for it to standardize and for people to get familiar with it. The other thing is that there's some regulatory implications to supporting ZK at the layer 1. So there's definitely a lot of blockchains that integrate ZK. So for example, like Ethereum has all these ZK rollups. There's some blockchains that are layer 1 blockchains that have ZK, like Mina and Midnight. And so these ZK platforms are generally supported by exchanges and governments and so on because they enable so many really useful use cases, especially in things like real world assets where a lot of financial institutions and governance need the ZK functionality to have any hope of working in a regulatory compliant way. So it's fairly openly embraced by a lot of different entities. However, in certain cases, some people want to try and avoid ZK for any negative implications around like privacy. This is pretty rare in the same way that blockchains themselves, if you just ignore ZK, there's people who are promoting blockchains like, oh, it brings decentralization. And there's people who are detractors and they say, oh, we don't really want decentralized systems. So it brings this kind of other dimension to it. So it has these implications, but I think on both sides, generally, this is worth it, especially because this is kind of the direction the industry is going. So, for example, if you look at the Ethereum roadmap, one of their big roadmap items is basically how do we ZKify Ethereum itself? How do we turn Ethereum, the blockchain itself, into a kind of a ZK-based blockchain? And so the problem they have is that Ethereum was not designed for this. And there's not a great straightforward path to doing that compared to, I think, for Cardano, because of the UTXO model, because of the fact we figure out a way to represent UTXOs in the ZK kind of design pattern at Starstream, we have a pretty good path to get this integrated earlier than what Ethereum could do. Now, of course, Starstream is a general VM in the same way that, there's multiple different blockchains using EVM. And so there can be multiple different blockchains using Starstream. And so people could reuse Starstream to create layer 2s on Ethereum or power Ethereum itself or build their own blockchain. The same way that people, build different things with EVM. I just think that Cardano has a pretty intuitive path for the integration, which is what makes it kind of interesting.
Okay, so I'm going to ask the question that all developers like. Developers love answering questions about timelines and roadmaps, shout out to Brian. So how how ready is Starstream to, let's say, be able to be deployed on a testnet or something? I mean, without taking into account the time needed for integration into Cardano node. Let's say, how far along are you in making an MVP that's stable enough to be able to test on a testnet?
Yeah, so Starstream, the code is already on GitHub, so you can go check it out. We already have it set up so people in the Starstream working group can start contributing. By the way, the Starstream working group is open. Anybody who's a developer who wants to contribute is more than welcome to join. Within the GitHub repo, like the code we have right now, it's still fairly early days. So, for example, one of the things we have right now that you can do is you can do transaction chaining for free. So, if you might know in Cardano, transaction chaining is a bit difficult. So, for example, if you want to do one action on DEX, like for example, swap a token, then provide liquidity, then provide that to a lending pool, chain a bunch of different actions together. It's pretty difficult to do. The wallets will typically struggle with this. The explorers will typically struggle with this. And so what ends up usually happening in Cardano is you have to split your transaction across multiple different transactions. Instead of doing everything at once, you do it step by step. Starstream allows you to batch multiple actions into a single transaction at no extra cost. So in a single transaction, you can do all the different interactions at once. And so we support this kind of transaction batching at the VM level. And so we have this already working as like our first example. We have some other concrete use cases that we're working on implementing. So for example, stable coins is something we'll probably have as like a proof of concept maybe early next month. We'll also be working on stuff like identity. So you can have like, proof of identity, proof of human, these kinds of things, as well as a few other use cases in mind that we're trying to build out. And this is trying to accumulate towards basically a playground, a developer playground, probably at the end of summer. So what can you do with a playground? The playground is a kind of website you can go to and just try writing a Starstream smart contract, compiling it, using it, get a good feel for it. But it's not to come with an actual blockchain. It's just the VM, just the kind of the core developer experience. Once we have this, people can get a pretty good idea of what developing on Starstream means, the different advantages, the developer experience of it, and so people can have a much more clear formed opinion about the benefits of Starstream and if they really want this. And that's kind of the time we would do the governance action to see if people like the work that we're doing so far and if they want us to continue. Once we have this, then it's going to integrate that into Cardano itself. Most likely, the way that we'll start off is with Amaru, which, as you might know, is this alternative node written in Rust. The reason why is because Amaru is like a fairly new implementation of Cardano, so it's a bit easier to integrate something with, whereas the Haskell code base, because it's a bit older, it's a bit more involved. So we would integrate this into Amaru, and then we have basically a testnet, a Starstream testnet, to be able to play around with and try deploying stuff to testnet. And then if they like the experience and things go well, then the next step would be integrating to the core Cardano node and Haskell, and then deploying that to mainnet, which could be as early as next year.
That's really exciting. One thing I'm curious about, I mean, real quick. So we host these spaces every week, Wednesday at 16 UTC. If you guys are enjoying it so far, if you have any questions as well, leave some comments by clicking that button in the bottom right-hand corner. Put some retweets in there. If you'd like to see anybody on in the later weeks, feel free. We have great guests on every week. And, big narrative around Cardano lately, Sebastian, has been around, Bitcoin integrations. And to me, it seems evident that multiple teams are working on these integrations, to bring, Bitcoin, utility for Bitcoin on Cardano, right? And I'm wondering where, this plays in, because Bitcoin's UTXO, and you mentioned the benefit of, integrating with Cardano first because it's UTXO based. Could you see a world where, the same thing can be said for Bitcoin, and this could be used to, have Bitcoin on Cardano in a trustless way?
Yeah, that's a good question. So there's a lot of people that are currently looking to try and get DeFi on Bitcoin. One of the ways you might be familiar with is basically to connect this to Cardano, so people can take their Bitcoin to Cardano, transact on Cardano with their Bitcoins. They pay transaction fees in Bitcoins, interact with the Cardano DeFi ecosystem, and then bring their Bitcoin back to, the Bitcoin blockchain at any time. And so the benefits of this Cardano integration is that you get access to the Cardano TVL, you get access to the Cardano dApps, and you can do this while still maintaining the kind of UTXO model that Bitcoin users are familiar with. So that means that if Starstream gets added to Cardano, then it means you can access Starstream directly with your Bitcoin. So you get access to these real-world asset use cases, and these DeFi use cases, and these identity use cases, and all these different things that Starstream unlocks. You get them for free as a Bitcoin user as well with the Cardano integration. Now, of course, you could deploy Starstream directly on Bitcoin itself without going through Cardano. The reason people historically don't do this is because Bitcoin is fairly opposed to any changes to the blockchain itself, to the Bitcoin blockchain itself. And so you can find different people trying to propose, adding new functionality to Bitcoin to enable, new VMs or different smart contract platforms, all these different things to be added to Bitcoin. Historically, they don't go anywhere. And so this kind of idea of leveraging Cardano for that instead is something that's, gained some amount of traction as a way to give people with Bitcoin some exposure to DeFi as an opt-in instead of a change to Bitcoin itself. And so Starstream, by integrating to Cardano, would automatically get connected to that infrastructure.
So we would have to see a proposal to the Bitcoin community for this integration to support Bitcoin on Cardano, you think?
Depends how you want to do it. The most efficient ways to do it, yes, would require that. There's some ways to do it that don't require this, which is what's kind of interesting.
You've had hot takes in the past. I'm curious, what do you think of this new narrative that a lot of people are working on for Cardano around Cardano expanding, Bitcoin's DeFi layer?
Yeah, I think in general, if you look at the Cardano roadmap, there's a lot of different projects that are being included in it. I think the kind of overarching topic across all of them is basically build whatever you want. So it used to be that in Cardano, unless you wanted to join the founding entities, there's not much you could do. And then smart contracts came out, which allowed anybody to build their own dApp. You no longer need to be part of the founding entities. Now you can build your own dApp. There's still a lot of things that would require too much coordination for you to do yourself. So, like, for example, if you want to build a sidechain for Cardano, if you want to build a layer 2 for Cardano, if you want to build a state channel for Cardano, if you want to build restaking for Cardano, if you want to connect Cardano to other blockchains, like, there are a lot of things that were kind of enshrined functionality that would be hard for you to add without having to add it to the core blockchain itself. And a lot of the Cardano roadmap is to basically unlock these functionalities so that anybody can use them. If you want to build your own kind of state channel, if you want to build your own sidechain, if you want to build your own layer 2, if you want to build your own system that reuses Cardano stake pools in any way you want, you would basically have access to this in a permissionless way. You could just leverage the Cardano blockchain. And so, a lot of the roadmap is kind of focused on this. What I like to say is you can just do things. You no longer need permission. You no longer need to go change the Cardano node itself. You can just do things now. And that's kind of the goal of a lot of these different roadmap items in the Cardano budget that you might have seen floating around. And so a lot of these, pitches that add new functionality is kind of also what Starstream is looking to, which is like, hey, like, you want to do ZK stuff, like, you no longer have to figure out how to do everything yourself. There's a path for it, and now you can just leverage Starstream to build all these ZK functionalities, and you have a really good path towards that. And I think a good example of that is that there's a Cardano project called ENS Coin, I think, something like that. I always forget their name. They recently put out a blog post saying that they're gonna wait until ZK functionality is available in Cardano to continue building, because they tried to do it themselves and they were running into issues, and they're like, okay, we'll just wait until somebody figures it out, and then we'll kind of leverage whatever solution appears out there. So there's multiple kind of dApps that are waiting for this functionality. I know also like a lot of the different CF initiatives around real world assets and these kinds of things would benefit a lot from this as well. And so, these kind of functionalities that we're bringing to the table basically unlocks these developers to just have a path forward where they can just build things and they don't need to wait for people or ask for permission from people. They can just have a clear go ahead.
So you're quite the technical builder. Do you see any gaps in the roadmap on a technical aspect that are missing? I mean, outside of Starstream, obviously. Do you see any gaps or holes in the current roadmap and budget for technical stuff that we might need in the future?
Well, obviously we're working on Starstream, so we're trying to fill the gap ourselves. So instead of saying like, "Hey, you guys should go fill this gap," we're kind of stepping up to the table and saying, "Hey, you think there's an opportunity here, and we can fill that gap." So note that Starstream is a public good. The code is open source. MIT. It's just something that we're building that anybody can leverage. So this is not like some venture or some kind that we're trying to squeeze into here. It's a public good that anybody can contribute to. And in the working group, we have something like 30 companies involved in Starstream. So we're kind of trying to fill that gap. I think one thing that um, needs to be done is less of a technical question. It's more of a community question, which is out of all these options, what does the Cardano community actually want to focus on? So, unfortunately, there's only 24 hours in a day, and everybody has a finite amount of money, and so you have to pick priorities in life. And so, for example, in Cardano, we spent the past 5 or 6 years working on state channels with Hydra, right? And one of the budget items is continued Hydra development. Do we, as the Cardano community, want to keep working on state channels? They bring different benefits. There's some cool use cases being built with Hydra, like you might have seen the Hydra Doom demo. But also, it's been a kind of R&D roadmap item for 6 years or so. So there probably needs to be a question of, as a community, do we want to keep focusing on this? And if we do want to keep focusing on it, what do we get? Like, for example, if we have another year of Hydra development, what do we get from it? What can we expect as an end result? Now I'm using Hydra as an example. This applies to many different things, like Mithril, like Midgard, like Plutus itself. For example, like the partner chains model. There's many different things that are kind of just assumed roadmap items. Where it's like, well, we've been working on this for a few years. Like, of course, it's in their roadmap. But I think for these things, it'd be good is now that we have the gear up system, if we could, as a community, decide, which key priorities we want to focus on. And so that's why for Starstream as well, one of our goals is to do this kind of proposal to say like, hey, DREPs, like, what do you think about Starstream? Do you want us to keep working on this? Because I think this should not be something where I play internal politics and get a few key people involved and then we just go with it. I think it should be something as we discuss as a community to say like, hey, like, there's this kind of opportunity that exists. Something that no other kind of Cardano technology is handling, could enable a lot of really powerful use cases. Um, do we want to focus on this as an ecosystem? And of course, there's a finite amount of things you can focus on, right? So, do we want to spend mental time thinking about Starstream, or do we prefer to spend on other efforts? So our goal as a project is to try and make Starstream so good that people look at this and be like, "Oh man, like Starstream is so good. It enables so many cool things. It's a great developer experience. Like, this is a no-brainer to focus on this as one of the key focuses on the roadmap." Um, and I think other initiatives should have this kind of goal as well. Like, for example, like partner chains. There's a lot of different projects being built with partner chains. Right now, obviously, Midnight being the most well-known one. Do we want to keep working on the partner chain framework? What will we get from focusing on the partner chain framework for another year? What are like the results? What are the costs of that, and which costs bring which features? Right? It's some discussion that we need to have as a community to figure out what we want to focus. Because unless we do this, then it's basically guesswork. It's like developers guessing what other developers might want. It's developers guessing what users might want. Developers guessing what investors might want. There's a lot of kind of guesswork going on, like trying to build the right product for the user. I think it's probably better if we just have a discussion as a community to talk about what we think we should prioritize.
I believe a big priority for the Cardano community that you've been seeing pop up a lot is people recognizing that, the ADA inflation that's being paid to SPOs and users for staking rewards is going down. And, eventually it's going to be abysmal, right? And I think that, a lot of people are talking about the idea that we need to somehow make the layer one profitable, to pay the, security requirements that comes with running a layer one network at this scale. And I think what you're proposing here is really a different bet on the future. What I've been seeing, at least, this is what, we're kind of, what is being presented to us is that, we need to focus on L2s to bring back this economic value to the layer one for the security in terms of other tokens or in terms of rolling up these transactions and putting them, on the layer one. So, this idea really excites me. Personally, just the idea of us having, instead of just getting rid of the layer one for anything other than security, well, why don't we just make the transactions in the smart contract language within the layer one as efficient as possible, and introduce CK rollups, a new type of technology that could, open up new pathways for businesses to create directly on the layer one without having to rely on these partner chains, for various utilities that's being offered. So, I think that, it is really exciting. And I kind of want to, for anybody listening in, if you guys have questions, feel free to post them on the comment section or just request speaker and come on up. We're in that little time window now. So, Sebastian, could you see a world where, this Starstream technology could, help us solve that problem of, continuing to pay for Cardano's security layer? Because we need revenue for Cardano to fund the DAO. We need revenue for Cardano to fund stakers and SPOs. And, could Starstream, be a way of us being able to handle all of the transactions at once on the layer one?
Yeah, it's a great point. So when I talked earlier about one of the things in the Cardano roadmap and the Cardano budget being like you can just do things, a lot of these are actually kind of embedded as new potential revenue streams. So for example, like this Bitcoin DeFi, which is like Bitcoin users can now come and use Cardano. They're paying transaction fees in Bitcoin, which provides a new kind of revenue stream for stake pool operators. The partner chains, if they're being operated by Cardano stake pools, brings a new revenue stream to Cardano stake pools. Mithril, which allows you to build new overlay networks on Cardano, brings new revenue to stake pools. Like a lot of these things are not just unlocking new developer functionality, they're doing this in a way that also brings new revenue streams to the Cardano stake pools, which means that we rely less on inflation and more on revenue generating opportunities. And the interesting thing is that being profitable in the blockchain space from a blockchain perspective, like how do blockchains actually become profitable? Well, we have three examples. For example, Bitcoin became profitable with NFTs, NFTs on Bitcoin. Ethereum became profitable first with DeFi, then later again with NFTs, and then again with layer twos. So they managed to achieve it multiple times in different use cases. And then Solana became profitable primarily with meme coins, where the blockchain itself was earning more revenue for delegators than the cost of inflation. And so this is not an impossible task. In fact, we've seen it happen. And the key insight is that it usually just requires one bet, one use case to really pop off. for it to kind of pan out. And so, obviously, one of the big bets on the Cardano side that could pan out is partner chains, which is okay. Let's allow people to create different sidechains for Cardano that can leverage the stake pool operator set. And then by doing this, you pay stake pool operators for some shared security, and this brings new revenue to the project, to the blockchain. And I think that's definitely an interesting option. It's definitely something that is going to happen. We can see this with Midnight, but you can also see some other projects working on this, like Quantum Husky, if you've heard of that project as well. The question is, how much security of Cardano do you want to leverage? So if you don't know how partner chains work, basically it allows you to build your own blockchain that's powered by Cardano stake pools. But not all Cardano stake pools, a subset of Cardano stake pools. So Cardano stake pools can decide to opt in to validate this partner chain, but they don't have to do it. So it gives you some part of Cardano security, but not all. And also because this partner chain is not on Cardano, there's a bit more trust. It's kind of like a country paying the United States military for them to protect their country. Obviously, the United States would have an interest in this because now they have troops located in your countries. They have a new point where they can do intelligence gathering and all these different operations. They're getting paid for this by the countries, so it's not necessarily a loss of revenue. So they have all these benefits. So the United States could do it, but also they could at any point decide, like, actually we don't care, or God forbid, they decide to actually invade the country they're meant to protect, right? And that's kind of what the partner chains is as well, which is like you're borrowing security from the Cardano stake pool operators, and they're very strongly economically incentivized to secure your new project because they're the ones operating it. They earn revenue from it. It helps grow the pie. They have all these benefits, and so rationally, they would never, attack or be malicious towards these new partnerships that come out. But you're not 100% leveraging the security of Cardano, because it's possible for your sidechain to be attacked without Cardano itself being attacked. So it's a bit more of a nuanced security discussion. Now, this is a bit different from layer 2s, which are meant to leverage 100% of stake pool operators, where regardless of the stake pool, regardless of whether or not the stake pools care or not, they're kind of forced into ensuring the security of this new construction. Notably, you might have heard of different layer 2s like Arbitrum, Optimism, Base, and so on. And these layer 2s work by having their own sequencer set. So again, it's not 100% relying on the security of Ethereum. At the end of the day, it does rely on the security of Ethereum, but there's this intermediate step where there's these sequencers that you have to trust to order transactions properly and so on. And this concept of sequencers for these layer 2s is a concept that primarily comes up for performance reasons. People wanted transactions to be faster than what Ethereum can provide, can have finality faster than what Ethereum provides, because it unlocks a lot of new use cases, and of course, also as a way to kind of capture revenue from the layer 2. But there's a lot of downsides to having these kind of sequencers. You might have heard in Ethereum space, a lot of people talk about centralized sequencers being a risk to protocols and being a centralization concern. So as a kind of workaround to this, people have come up with this idea of based rollups, which are rollups that don't have sequencers. Instead, the sequencers are the block producers of the underlying layer 1. So it gets rid of the sequencer centralization concerns. The downside, of course, is that now you inherit the block time and the finality of the underlying layer 1 blockchain. And so, in a sense, you could think of different virtual machines on Cardano as being these kinds of based rollups, which is It's kind of a roll-up like infrastructure where we're adding new virtual machines to Cardano, but we're not doing this in a way that requires adding a new actor, adding a new sequencer. It's not done in a way that requires having stake pools, opt into things and opt out of things, and have to think about like, do I want to attack this or do I want to protect this network? It's done in a way that fully leverages 100% of the stake pools in a way that's tied directly to the layer 1 blockchain. So it's a different approach to expanding the functionality of blockchain. I think it's the one that makes sense for our use case because the execution model of Starstream is so similar to Cardano already. They have a pretty clear path right into layer 1. And so if you have a way that allows us to bring new functionality, that allows us to reuse liquidity, it allows us to reuse the users, allows us to reuse the security, my perspective, this is the best path forward. Some people might have thoughts on this, but as somebody who's built sidechains, who's built layer 2s, who's built all these different things, this scenario, I think this is the best call for us.
Well, I really appreciate you being here, Sebastian. I'm going to do a quick little Âtrium update before we head out of here today. And for anyone listening in, we're also going to be doing a podcast on my YouTube channel. We're going to be scheduling one with Sebastian, so look out for that over the next couple of weeks. We're going to dive even further into Starstream. But on the Âtrium side, this week we started gearing up for mainnet. On Monday we started spinning up some mainnet servers. We've been building Âtrium for over 2.5 years now, and it's kind of a monumental day, or monumental week, monumental month. Just even starting to spin up some of what we've been building for the past 2.5 years on mainnet is a good feeling. Because we're not adding any new features to the testnet. We have this testnet live where you guys can get in there and see what we're bringing to mainnet. We're bringing 3 different smart contracts, staking baskets and profiles, and also POI staking. So you guys can get in there and play around with it now. There's an airdrop hooked up to it. You can level up your profile NFT and bring those rewards that you get for leveling it up to mainnet if you mint one on mainnet. So it's a great time to get into our community. We've got a thriving Discord, and a lot of people are excited for once mainnet's up. Once we have mainnet up, we're going to be testing it internally, and seeing if we can break anything, seeing if we can fix anything, and then once we're ready, we're going to give everybody a date, and we're going to bring the project to mainnet on Cardano. It's been a long road, and we're really excited. I think that Âtrium is going to be very impactful for Cardano in terms of education, in terms of community, and growth ultimately. And we have a new feature that we released probably about a month ago. But if you come join our spaces, or maybe watch a YouTube video that we post, or read our Medium articles, we hide codes within the spaces so that you guys tune in. And this code this week is PIMA. If you guys get on Âtrium, you type in PIMA, you'll get some XP on your profile NFT that'll get you a larger airdrop once mainnet comes around, and it also gets you more unlocks, some more customization options for your profile NFT. So yep, just keep tuning in. We're going to have another space next week, 16 UTC. We'll have another guest. If there's guests you'd like to see, just comment them down below. It's exciting times. People seem a bit grumpy, but I think we're in a really good period right now for blockchain as a whole, and Cardano specifically, and the future's looking bright. So thank you guys all for tuning in. I appreciate it. Thank you, Sebastian, for joining. It's informative, as always. You've taught me a lot throughout the years. And Steven, I appreciate you hosting. You did a great job today.
Yeah, thanks, Peyton. Thanks, Sebastian. Looking forward to hearing more from Starstream, definitely. And yeah, make sure you tune in to our space next Wednesday at 1600 UTC. See you guys then. Bye.
Bye.